It is a new day in America for Democrats, so says Nancy Pelosi, the House Minority Leader, likely to become House Speaker again, as she was in 2007. Republicans holding on to the Senate, indeed making gains, but Democrats regaining the House of Representatives, although the final number is still not in. But let's look to what this all means. Look who's still up. He's been through the returns, he's been writing pieces for online, but he's here before he takes his leave of CBC. Keith Boag, our Washington correspondent, thank you so much for staying
Thanks
for us.
Having me.
This was intended to be the first verdict on the presidency of Donald Trump. What did the American voters deliver?
Well, if you understand that there were two separate elections going on last night, one that took place throughout the whole country, and another one for the Senate that was fought on battlegrounds that were mainly in Republican territory, then I think you can look at this and see that if you look at the national popular vote for the House elections, it was kind of a landslide for Democrats. It was a repudiation of the president.
Okay.
Now, if you count up the number
So you can say it was a blue wave?
I think that,
For the House?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you can say that. We want to look at all of the data when it comes in before we declare the blue wave. But I think that the tendency to declare the wave as being determined by how many seats Democrats win is kind of wrong-headed, because we all understand that Democrats start off with a disadvantage when competing with Republicans for House seats. That's because of gerrymandering, it's because of the density of their voters in urban areas and so on. So they start off by giving the Republicans something like a 6-point head start. It's looking like they won by 8 to 9 points. That's big. That's
popular vote.
In popular vote. Republicans have had a couple of big wins in the last 20 years where they've won a lot of seats and captured the House, but they've not had anything that delivered them that margin of victory in the popular vote.
So when you talk about Democrats winning popular vote, that has echoes, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
2016,
yeah.
Right? So, but yet we've seen, again, with delivering the Senate, holding on to the Senate, and Trump declaring success last night, we have seen that Trump and Trumpism remain a potent force. In
that part of the country, yeah. And Trump, I think was careful to campaign when he understood better what the dynamics of the election looked like they were going to be. He really attached himself to saving the Senate and campaigning in places where he felt they at least had a good chance and would win. He did not want to associate himself with defeats. But he did visit, for instance, Montana 4 times. There's one senator in Montana who was a Democratic senator who he was after there. That's all he went there for, but he went there 4 times. And the last I looked, that's one of the undecided races. The last I looked, the Republican was winning there. But maybe just as important is the whole impact of the Kavanaugh Supreme Court confirmation hearing. Yes. Trump mentioned that throughout his rallies, saying that this was the election of the caravan and Kavanaugh, right? If you look at who won and who lost last night, the one red state Democrat who voted for Kavanaugh won. The 3 red state Democrats who voted against Kavanaugh, all of them lost. I think that's a very telling. I think it mattered.
Yeah, it did, I think, for both sides. Montana, incidentally, still undecided, but with the Republican in front. Life changes for Donald Trump as president as of this moment, or as of January, I guess, when the Democrats take control of the House. How far do you think they're going to go in terms of subpoenas and oversight and investigations? How far can they go strategically?
Well, okay, first of all, you're already hearing reports that they're going to demand Trump's tax returns, and that may lead to a fight all the way to the Supreme Court. And we know that there will be pressures from their base who've been itching for this for a while, who believe that the Republicans did nothing to hold the president accountable, and that's a constitutional failure because the House and the Senate, those branches of government, are supposed to be checks on the presidency. So there's going to be pressure for their base to do a lot, but they need to be careful with that. They cannot. It really wouldn't serve them well to be identified only as the party of investigations and subpoenas. So I think they need to use the opportunity they now have to introduce legislation, to control the budget, to try to really crystallize an identification of themselves that's positive with voters. Take something, for example, like immigration reform. They could come up with a bill on immigration reform that would have details that would challenge the notion, the stereotype that Trump has presented, that they're just for open borders, just for giving away citizenship and all that kind of thing. Make clear that they aren't for those things, that they do have a plan. So it gets defeated in the Senate. Do it again, gets defeated in the Senate. Do something like what Republicans did so effectively with Obamacare, which was pass legislation over and over again in one house that was defeated in another house, but that called for the repeal of Obamacare.
Because you knew what they stood for.
You knew what they stood for. They never succeeded, but you had no doubt that what they were standing for.
Okay, so lower drug costs, that might be something, infrastructure, immigration reform, these are all things on which they could stake
Absolutely.
a legislative identity.
Yeah.
It's all about positioning now. You're on. You're the election campaign for 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't already underway, it certainly is as of this morning. So what do you think you are going to be covering and writing about now?
You mean in terms of the presidential race? I've already been writing about the things that I just mentioned. I think, we're very soon going to see some candidates declaring that they're running. There's already, I think there's some talk that now that Beto O'Rourke is not going to be a senator, maybe he could be a presidential candidate.
Really?
He's a popular guy. I think he has a real constituency. He's attractive and exciting in ways that maybe could make people forget that the last race he was in, he lost. It's an important thing. I don't know.
Do you think
how
it has to be a woman, though, for the Democrats? In that, women were so strong.
I saw a poll recently that any woman who's thinking about running against him polls extremely well against Donald Trump.
Okay.
I think we saw some of that effect in these elections, too.
We certainly did. I mean, the numbers in driving record numbers of women, particularly to the
It's a
House
tough
for the
fight.
Democrats yesterday.
It should not be overlooked that Trump has the advantage. Incumbency is a really, really valuable asset for any sitting president. It's
and
rare.
He's raised $100 million already for his re-election campaign, a phenomenal amount. So throw down the gauntlet and off you go. Thank you. Great to have you in. Take a look at these, the headlines in the United States this morning. A new split Congress after the midterms, Democrats regaining control of the House, and of course, Republicans strengthening their hold in the Senate. It's a new political order. President Trump appears to be taking it in stride. After all, as the New York Daily News headline puts it, there you see, split happens. Want to bring you a Republican reaction to what happened yesterday. So we have a strategic panel of strategists. Rena Shaw, who's a consultant with Red Fort Strategies, a senior aide to 2 Republican members of the House, and also she was working with Evan McMullin back in 2016, and Dan Scandling, who's a senior director at APCO, which is a global communication consultancy, and he was 25 years on Capitol Hill as Chief of Staff and Press Secretary. So glad to have both of you with me. Thank you, both in Washington this morning. Hello.
Hello.
Let me begin by bringing up the first tweet we got from President Trump last night, his initial response to the results. Let's take a look at it together. Tremendous success tonight. Republicans lost the House, lost in a nationwide vote, and lost by a margin of about 7-8% in the popular vote. Tremendous success, Rena, or how do you see it?
The president really doesn't know what he's saying sometimes. And this morning I woke up not really caring what the occupant of the Oval Office thought. I am delighted that there are going to be more women in U.S. Congress as of last night. I mean, history was made. As an American woman, I'm just so, it gave me goosebumps because I believe that more women create a stronger democracy. We make up about 51% of the U.S. population. Until last night, we were around 20% of U.S. Congress. It was very low numbers. Very, very low, and we have something to celebrate today that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. People say that these women that won last night were clearly mobilized, energized, angry at Trump. I say women have it within us to look when there's a problem, look at something and say, we need to solve it. So I think women ran because they believe in this country. They believe they have ideas and solutions to solve some of the problems. And I think Donald Trump should be scared because the future is not looking very good for the Republican Party when it comes to women. And he should really tip his hat to Senate leader Mitch McConnell because obviously the Senate did well, but losing in the House was no tremendous success.
Okay. I should have probably introduced you saying Republican who is strongly opposed to the direction of Donald Trump. That's how I've introduced you in the past. It has not changed, apparently, because you took us right to women for all the strides that women made, both in terms of voting as activists and as candidates and now elected members. By far and away, they're Democrats. And so let me take a look and let me go to you, Dan, for your take on that. You saw for the Republicans, the suburban affluent, educated, notably white woman fleeing your party yesterday.
Yeah, everybody saw that coming. That was a foregone conclusion that the Republicans had lost the suburban moms and the suburban women. That was a foregone conclusion. That was nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that wasn't surprised. In fact, in my home state of Virginia. But what are the consequences
of it, though?
I think, look, the country's divided, and the country's going to continue to be divided. And again, you had Republican women elected governors. Chrissy Noem was elected governor of South Dakota. So it's got a long way to go to figure out where we're still going to be in 2020. And if we think that the country's divided now, this next 2 years are going to even be worse.
Oh. Cheapers. There's a pessimistic tone on which to just think for a moment, given everything that everyone has been through, all the anger and the fear and the split. If it's going to get worse, that's a concern. Could it not, Rena, though, be something to Trump's benefit? I mean, I'm wondering if now that he has a counterbalance in the House, I mean, is it going to be a good or bad thing for him? Potentially, could he benefit from his new enemy there?
Well, he's not sure, but he's thinking right what you said. I think that this is looking good to him. Why? Because he thinks now he can blame everything on presumably Speaker Pelosi. So he's liking that bit. He's going to say he's trying to get things passed, but he's going to blame it on a House that doesn't want anything to pass that's of his. And so what we have is basically a huge loss for Americans, and that compromise is dead. As a former Hill staffer, I know that nothing gets done on Capitol Hill until people come to the middle and they meet. And what we see now is a GOP conference that's all in for Trump. We know that he remade the party in his image, and everybody now who is a Republican in Congress is pretty much going to be a loyalist. My people really lost out last night. People like Barbara Comstock in Virginia 11, Carlos Curbelo in Florida. I did not wake up yesterday morning really thinking that would happen, and those were my moderates. Those were the people that were willing to stand up to Trump, and the effect was that they lost their seats. And here we have a very divided Congress that I think is reflecting the country. So we're going to have to do some soul searching as Americans.
Pick up on that point, if you would, Dan. Compromise is dead, and the loss. Compromise is dead. The moderate Republican seems to be gone. You were telling me just off camera that the member for whom you used to work lost last night. Where is your base now?
Both sides are going to retreat to their bases, and both sides are going to go, either the left is going to go farther to the left and the right's going to go farther to the right, and it's all angling now for 2020. And that's why I think you're going to see even more venom, even more anger, even more division in the country as we go forward, because both sides have got a role to play leading up to the presidential elections.
So embolden other candidates to follow the Trump model? I mean, even he said in that interview with Sinclair Broadcasting at the beginning of this week, maybe he should have dialed down his tone a bit.
Look, both sides are going to really ramp it up. I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't think that's going to happen, because what you're seeing is the American populace is extremely divided and is playing to their base. And both sides are guilty of doing it. It's not just Republicans. Democrats are doing the same thing. Sometimes it's a hard thing for Democrats to hear and accept, but it's what's happening. And that's what the Democrats do. Mrs. Pelosi, who I've known and worked with, and my former boss worked with for years and had a very good relationship with, she's got her own bully pulpit now. She'll be able to go to the floor every day. Her team will be able to go to the floor. They'll control the agenda. She'll be able to have press conference. That's what they get to do now that they're in the majority. And then you'll have the Republicans both in the Senate and the executive branch saying what they want to say. And so I think that you're going to see both sides just pouring gas on the fire every day.
There was a glimmer of hope last night. At first, Sarah Sanders said that Trump probably wouldn't call Pelosi in light of a House takeover by Democrats, and he did. And he sort of expressed, some I don't know, happiness for bipartisanship or whatever. I think it was a good move. Look, the age of Trump, this era is so uncertain. Modern politics has been turned on its head by Trump. He's made everybody think that they can be president of the United States, especially millennials who really came out and voted yesterday, the people under 30 and under 35 like myself. So I think it's just a unique new chapter for our country. I am so hopeful. I think you have to remain an optimist to work in politics. And so so I'm kind of hoping that our better angels take over and that we can figure out a way to come together at a time that we are so divided. Yesterday I was driving by the Capitol and it occurred to me that Republicans were in charge of both chambers, but maybe a divided government would actually unite the country when we've been so divided. I'm not sure. It's kind of a funny, unique,
I don't know.
Feeling.
Sarah Sanders said that Trump would not alter his legislative agenda at all, which means there could be clashes, although maybe there is a need to get a win on something like infrastructure or prescription drugs or something like that.
And he's a flip-flopper, Heather. Don't count him out.
True.
He can flip-flop on many things, as
Dan,
we've seen.
We certainly have. Dan, let me ask you, you mentioned that this would embolden candidates running on the Republican ticket in 2020. What about challengers? Do you see, has this result today, this split result, and the very strong popular vote message, has that given somebody like a John Kasich license to challenge Trump?
Look, I'm been of the belief, and this might come as I don't think President Trump will run for re-election.
Really?
I think he's going to walk away. I think he's going to say, I fixed the economy, I provided a tax break, I've built a wall, I've done this, I've done that, and he walks away. Why wouldn't he? He's not going to want to have to stand for election and face the possibility of losing after last night's results. I really firmly believe, and have said this for a long time, I think he walks away and goes on and says, I made America great again, and walks off into the sunset.
I believe to the contrary, my friend. I really think he loves it when he goes out in America and puts on these rallies. He just loves the energy. He really thrives off of that. I don't think he likes the job of governing. I think it's boring to him, and he's kind of like over it, if you will. But really, I think he'll stick it out. As long as these rallies go on, as long as his base turns out. I think last night indicated that the base is stronger. The Republicans coalesce behind him. That's actually a really plus point in Republican category, because Democrats are going to have a hard time coalescing around Pelosi again when so many of them have said that they feel like, yes, she's a fundraiser who's a master fundraiser, but people are kind of over her too. So I think the advantage is for Republicans.
50 candidates said they couldn't support her as Speaker. So her future in that role is a little bit of a question mark this morning anyway. Dan, I'll give you the last word. This has been terrific. As you project, Trump not running, but project to a little bit closer near term, 11:30 this morning, he's holding a news conference. There was some debate over whether he would hold the traditional presidential response news conference. Unlikely he'll say something like Obama, calling it a shellacking. What do you think we'll hear from Trump this morning?
I think he'll declare victory. He's gained seats in the Senate. He gained key gubernatorial seats. I think he's going to declare victory. He's going to say that I couldn't control the House, and we're moving forward, and we're going to press with our agenda.
A pleasure to have you both this morning. Great conversation. Rena Shaw and Dan Scandling, Republican strategists, both in Washington this morning.
Was anticipating a blue wave tonight. It's not going to get it. Maybe you get a ripple, but I certainly don't think that there's a blue wave.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, as she spoke last night on behalf of the White House spokesperson, downplaying the Democrats winning the House in the midterm elections. The reality perhaps somewhere in the middle, not the blue tidal wave that some Democrats had been hoping for with a pickup or a flip of 35 to 40 seats, but still enough to win control of the House. Want to get the assessment of a Democratic strategist with you this morning. Craig Varoga is in Washington this morning, listening to my conversation with Keith, so we can weigh in on all of that. Craig, good to have you so early. Thank you for being with us. You heard Sarah Sanders. You heard what she said. Not the blue wave, kind of downplaying what happened last night for Democrats with the House. How do you see it? What was the message that you got?
Well, I mean that's the same White House that lied about the size of the inauguration crowds. That was a big night, for Democrats. We don't know exactly how big, it's going to be, but winning the House of Representatives is historic. It's a repudiation of Donald Trump. Now, of course, there are some disappointments in some of the governor's races. But the Democrats did pick up governor's races. The Democrats did, pick up a lot of state legislative chambers. So it's going to be a different world. And if you just look at the popular vote, not a good night for Donald Trump. But, he still is not to be underestimated as a political force in the United States and the world.
Yeah, you certainly saw that, what you'll be fighting come 2020, and I want to get to that. Now you move to take over the House and to govern there. So how do you think your party should govern? I mean, will it be an olive branch for bipartisanship? Will you try to lower the temperature, or do you think it's just going to be blocking everything possible?
Well, I think that voters want health care to be protected. The White House and the Republicans clearly do not want to protect health care. Voters also want an infrastructure package. And I think if there's one thing where there can be bipartisan agreement, it might be infrastructure and repairing roads and bridges and various other things in the country. But clearly, there will be differences of opinion. I don't think that this White House and this president are capable of being calm and being bipartisan. So, we'll see what happens. But I do think that health care will be protected. And I do think that there's a possibility for infrastructure.
People like Adam Schiff taking over as head, he will be the head of the House Intelligence Committee, probably chomping at the bit to get some of these subpoenas going out, to get some of these investigations underway. How far, as a strategist, would you say the party should go on those? How aggressively should you pursue Donald Trump? Taxes, family, business, everything, maybe all the way up to impeachment. Where do you fall?
Well, clearly there needs to be accountability, and clearly there needs to be an honest reporting of what happened. The current House was incapable of doing that. So I think we're going to learn a lot more. I do think that the first thing is to just determine what the facts are. That hasn't been possible under the current leadership in Congress, and that should be possible under the Democratic leadership. So I think that the first thing to do is to actually know what happened, because Congress and the Republican leadership have not been telling the truth to the American people. And now, we can get a more fair accounting of what's actually happened there. But, I think that we'll see, we'll have a better idea. I think the world will have a better idea now that the Democrats are in charge.
There's a real split in the party over whether you should embark on the road to the other I word, which is, in fact, impeachment. Lots of risks attached to that because the American people may not want that. Where do you think things will go?
Impeachment is, if you go back and you look at what happened in the 1970s with Richard Nixon, there was not, a groundswell for impeachment until people had actually learned what had happened. Mm-hmm. And I think with the accountability and with more open investigations, we'll have a better idea, but I don't think that, off the bat, that's something that the Democrats, are going to be talking about. But I do think the American people want to know the truth about what happened, whether it's with Russia or whether it was with the corruption and the various other problems that the current administration has. So it's, let's see what the facts are there. But in addition to that, let's protect health care and let's try to do infrastructure.
Let's look to the future, positioning the party for 2020. It's interesting to see the representatives you have elected to go into the House, young, women, diverse. Yes, there are centrists, but there are a whole lot of very proud liberal progressives who are going to be joining things on Capitol Hill. For the party, do you foresee a period of time of sort of reflection, self-examination? Which way is the best way to go?
Well, look, I think in some of the races that the Democrats lost, where there were stars of national caliber, there may be some soul searching there. But I think that what we know is that women candidates did extremely well in this election. Women voters voted overwhelmingly, for Democrats and repudiated the Republican Party. I also think that, we're seeing a shift in the coalitions where the suburbs used to be comfortably Republican, and now they're becoming much more Democratic. So, and they're going to be, 20 people or more on the Democratic side who are running for president. And I think it's going to take a while, for that to sort out. But I do think that, the power behind, what happened last night, especially in the House, was driven by women candidates and was driven by women voters. And I think that, more than ideology, it's that inclusiveness that's going to, power the Democratic, campaign into 2020. Which I think, it starts today.
I was going to say, I was just about to wish you well on the campaign, which undoubtedly is underway as of this morning.
Well, when you think, 3 years ago to the Canadian parliamentary elections, and I think that they were about 77 days long, which was the longest ever. We're going to have a 2-year campaign for president in the United States, and it begins today.
I don't think you're ever out of campaign mode, if you want my opinion. Thank you so much, Craig. I really appreciate your assessment this morning. Craig Varoga joining us.
Likewise.
Bye.